Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Murphy's Law. I'm Eric Murphy, and this episode's a little different. If you have not seen the first part of my conversation with Jenna about the ontological argument, go ahead and click right here. That's a link to episode, the first half of this. This is the second half of the ontological argument. Jenna Belk, how's it going?
Hi.
Hey! So I guess we should pretend that we haven't been talking already. How are you? we're picking back up. We've gone over the ontological argument for the existence of God, or at least the basics of the ontological argument. And it turns out that I have another half of a show, but it took a lot for us to get through what we went through. And so we're picking this up in part 2. And so just to recap, we went over St. Anselm of Canterbury and his argument for the existence of God. And now we're going to be moving on 900 years. So first, let's make sure that we remember this argument here. By definition, God is a being than which none greater can be imagined. Sub in maximally great being, sub in omni-God. Those are the kind of operating definitions over the years. A being that necessarily exists in reality is greater than a being that does not necessarily exist. Thus, by definition, if God exists as an idea in the mind, but does not necessarily exist in reality, then we can imagine something that's greater than God. But we can't imagine anything greater than God. Thus, if God exists in the mind as an idea, then God necessarily exists in reality. God exists in the mind as an idea, therefore God exists in reality. We can break that even tighter to we're defining omni-God. And if God is the highest possible, greatest thing, then God has to exist, because if he didn't, then he wouldn't be the greatest. And so if you can imagine it, then you're basically defining your God into existence. So what's interesting here is I kind of want to draw attention to part 5. Thus, if
that was the one that sticks out to me the most.
Good, because that's what we're going to talk about. Thus, if God exists in the mind as an idea, then God necessarily exists in reality.
I don't understand how you can say that and not sub God for anything.
Well, so let's take a look at that word necessarily.
Okay.
And that's what Alvin Plantinga did. Alvin Plantinga, if let's say Anselm was 1,000 years ago, Alvin Plantinga was 100 years ago, or almost 100. He was born in the 1930s. I think he's in his mid 80s now.
Okay.
So still around, but an order of magnitude shorter. He took a look at that and went, okay, necessary. That exists in an entirely different form of logic. It's called modal logic. So modal logic is different than your epistemology, right? When we talk about epistemology, that is a different category than modal logic. So we're gonna need to shift here just a little bit in how we talk about this. So generally we stay in the realm of epistemology, how you know the things you know. Right. How the toolbox that you're using to understand what's true about the world. Mm-hmm. That's dependent on you and what you think and what you know. Modal logic has to do with things existing and not existing.
Ooh.
Right. So
it's like a objectivism?
Wait, is it modal? No, I'm sorry. It's ontology. I completely spaced for a second. I'm sorry. It's not modal. It's ontology. Modal is the method that we're going to be going. But ontology talks about things that exist. Epistemology talks about how you know the things you know. Geez, I'm embarrassed.
Okay.
So Modal
You realized
logic.
you were wrong and you corrected it. That's all that anybody can do,
I appreciate it.
and I applaud you.
Oh, yay. Let's dive into modal logic and kind of explain some of it, because it's actually a whole lot easier than people think. Modal logic has to do with two things: what is possible and what is necessary. There are a few other conditions that we can go through, but the big ones here, at least, are possible and necessary. So
These are such big words.
right? Well, let's put modal logic and ontology, let's put all of that off to the side, and let's just talk about how we understand if something's possible. Right? If something's possible, let's say, Jenna, is it possible that it could rain tomorrow?
Yes.
Sure. Does it necessarily mean it will rain tomorrow?
No.
No. And so it would be in that realm of possible. Necessary is different. So when we're using this logic, there's this term, all possible worlds.
Okay.
So
I'm thinking of The Flash, Earth 3, Earth 5.
sure. What's important here is that there's not a core, like there could be a possible universe where you married someone else. It's not fundamental to Jenna that you're married to the person that you're married to, that there are all of these conditional things about you. There's a possible universe where you're blonde. Right. So if we're talking about things that are possible, it just has to do with,
There's so many. There's a possible I could have been an ant.
Sure. So it's contingent upon the universe that we're in, and the world that we're in. Necessary is different. Necessary, well, here's the test for necessary. Or no, necessary is true in all possible worlds. So if something is necessary, it is the case in every possible universe. It seems like one hell of a test, though, right? How could you determine whether or not something's necessary? Most of the time it's definitions. So we talk about married bachelors, right? A bachelor, by definition, is someone who is not married.
Right.
And so you can say necessarily in all possible worlds, all bachelors are not married.
Okay.
How about if I were to say all circles are round?
What about living dead? Because we found a way to come up with a...
Depends on how you define it. See, it's all about definitions here.
Okay.
And so I like well, I'll go back to the round circles just because it's a little easier to play with. Can you imagine a circle that's not round?
Nope.
Is it possible to have a circle that's not round?
I don't think so.
Nope. So it is necessarily true that all circles are round.
Okay.
It's not just possible, it is necessary.
All right. Okay.
And so if I go back to Anselm's argument here, we look at number 5. If God exists in the mind as an idea, then God necessarily exists in reality. So we're gonna play with that just a little bit. Is God necessary? Well, it depends on your definition of God, right? And when we look at what Plantinga said, okay, here's how we're going to define God. God is the omnis, and you can also plug in maximal instead of the omnis, but the same thing, maximally powerful, maximally yada, 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 and exists.
Right.
In the definition. And well, here's the problem. You put the thing that you're testing in the definition.
Yeah.
It's circular. And so if you say, by definition, God exists, why? Because I'm defining God as something that exists.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. You've gone in a circle.
Yeah.
And when we look at how Anselm and how future apologists have talked about existence, I think that's where we can start teasing this apart, because ultimately we're talking about descriptors, right? We've got this idea of God, and we're applying all of these characteristics, right? All the omnis or maximally whatevers, all of those are things that we're applying to this concept of God.
Mm-hmm.
And then what Anselm does is he, in number 2, starts bringing in existence, right? Whether or not it exists.
Right. Concept, claim of existence. Right?
Well, yes, but where I'm going with this specifically is Anselm and Plantinga both talk about existence as if it's a property.
It's not?
No. And I want to talk about the nature of existence. And to help me talk
I don't
about
get it.
No worries. We are going to learn together a little bit about the nature of existence with this ducky.
Okay.
I was prepared for this. I'm ready for this.
Okay.
I know, right? This is why I was up until 3:30 in the morning. Actually, originally I had a little wireframe apple, but ducky's way better.
Well, apple's already taken.
Sure. So yeah.
Ducky's cute.
We've got our little wireframe ducky there. That ducky is the concept, right? We've got the concept of this ducky.
Okay.
Everything about it, we're mapping onto it. So maybe it's yellow. The color is something we're mapping onto it. Mm-hmm. If we're talking about an apple, it would be the sweetness of it, or the ripeness of it, or any of the characteristics of that thing. Those are all being put onto
by us.
Yes.
Right.
The framework itself, that ducky down there, is representing existence. You map things on to existence. Existence is not a property that you map on. And I'll tell you why. Think about if I got rid of that framework ducky. You have nothing. I'm not giving you something that exists. Can you give me any descriptors for it? Can you describe what color nothing is?
Apparently you can say anything and it's right.
Well,
it's like when you say, "Here's my friend."
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. What's your friend's name? There's nothing. There's nothing here. It
is.
Yeah, you have to have existence to map things onto. And so when Plantinga and when Anselm and when other apologists say we're defining God as one that exists, what we're really doing is we're treating existence as something that, as a property, and it's not. Existence is a precondition. You have to have existence to give properties to. So the wireframe duck is there because I don't want you to think about whether or not it has feathers. I don't want you to think about whether or not it's yellow or squeaks or, is buoyant in the bathtub. Those are all characteristics that you're going to put onto it. Right. You're going to map onto it. Existence.
But you at least have a shape of something.
Well,
to give me that map to draw on.
Yes. And even the shape, though, I mean, this is just kind of the concept.
Right.
But ultimately, the existence is the thing that we're putting everything on. If you have nothing that is existing, then you can't describe it.
Right.
So.
Right. But in order to have something that exists, you have to be able to map it, I guess is the best way to put it, in some way.
Yes. And
isn't that the definition of existence?
The definition of existence is not one that I actually prepared for. And I want to give a succinct one. So let me do that next week.
Okay.
That'll give me something.
Delve into existence more.
Yeah. But when we are talking about existence, we definitely should not be treating it as a property.
Right.
So kind of the other way around. It's you have to have something that exists to map properties onto. If you don't have that existing thing, then it doesn't have any properties. If you're giving
Right. So instead of saying, for example, like it is wet, it does exist is how we've been using it. But so just to kind of get a better visual of how to use it, instead of saying it does exist, it just exists. Does that make any sense?
It does, but not quite. Okay. So you had that colloquial thing already, right? The dog is wet. So wetness is being ascribed to the dog. We're assuming here that the dog exists.
In the first place.
Yes.
Before we can talk about it being wet.
Yes.
Okay. So we can't talk about existing on something.
Exactly.
I see.
Exactly. Existence is not something like wetness. It's not something like any of the other characteristics that are.
It's not a descriptor.
Exactly. It is a precondition. And that is how our ducky teaches us a little bit about the nature of existence. So going back to Plantinga, just a little bit, when we apply our understanding of existence, we start to see where the problem with the modal ontological argument for the existence of God is. There are a couple, obviously, but the one that I brought up today is existence. And so what do? They go, okay, God has the omnis and God exists. Therefore, God exists. And going back to, now I'm going to start bringing the language back in. Modal logic. Plantinga said that God necessarily exists in all worlds in the same way that all circles are round, in the same way that all bachelors are unmarried. Why? Because in his definition of God, God by definition exists. So here's how you test whether or not something is necessary. You ask yourself, does the opposite make sense? Is it intelligible? If it just turns into word salad, if you try and say the opposite of that phrase, then it's necessary. Example, I'm going to go stick with the circles being round. I'm testing whether or not all circles are round is necessary in all possible universes. So what's the inverse of that?
No circles are round.
Or not all circles are round. So we have all circles are round, and then not all circles are round.
Okay.
So all circles, no worries. All circles are round. Makes sense. Not all circles are round.
Doesn't make sense.
It doesn't.
At all.
Yeah. So all bachelors are unmarried. Not all bachelors are unmarried.
Doesn't work.
No, but we've applied the necessary test, and so we can see that those are both necessary statements.
Right.
And so if we look at God exists, that not existing God, right? The English language doesn't exactly give us a great way of putting that, but
not God exists.
Right, not God exists. If you're defining God as something that exists, then it turns into word salad. It does. And so if you're using that definition, then that's how they get to it being necessary.
Well, I guess.
But
I can see how it makes sense to them.
Yeah, right? And that's good. That was my entire goal here, is to try and give this in a way that you can see both sides and understand why they would take it that way. But now,
because by definition,
by that definition,
it exists.
But you can't define it that way because existence is not.
It's not a descriptor. It's not an adjective that you can be describing something with.
Right. It's a prerequisite to those things, and so you can also call it a category error.
Okay.
right? We're putting existence in the category of adjectives that it doesn't belong there.
That's so fascinating. You clear so many things up.
Oh, yay.
Like, oh my God, this is awesome.
Yay. I'm glad. I love sitting. I love doing this with you. It's a ton of fun.
You put it in a picture. Like, I'm such a visual person that you put it in a way that I can visualize that. So for example, like when somebody's talking to me and they're trying to describe this thing that they believe in, and I'm trying to visualize it, you put up this picture where I'm like, oh yeah, you said this thing right here.
Yeah,
that
the ducky helps.
And you're like, no, you think that it's this, but it's actually this.
I hope so. I'm trying, and if I ever get it wrong, please tell me, because I don't want to straw man you.
No.
But having a little visual aids like a little wireframe ducky helps.
Yes. and metaphors are huge for me.
I'm pretty good at those, actually. I'll take credit for that.
You are.
Thank you. So going into the call, because we've done an entire episode without giving a single clip. And so
somebody's going to have to go back and watch the first episode before they watch this anyway. So
that's true. But I'm going to play clip 1 again.
Okay, so what in your worldview, what is the foundation of reality that provides for the actuality and intelligibility of all things which derive?
Don't know. Okay.
It's just so funny.
So in there I said I don't know. And since then I've done a lot of research and I think that I have a better answer. And so hopefully there are a few small things that we can start to understand. So when he talks about intelligibility, right? Does it make sense? Are we talking about something that is necessary? Are we talking about existence? And I even challenged him on existence. Here.
When we talk about the foundation of reality or your ultimate authority, so it would be incoherent for me to not be circular in proving the foundation of reality.
So that's where he keeps losing me, is what is this foundation of reality?
Ah, got it. So the foundation of reality is, let's put a pin there for just a second, because
Okay.
I'm going to lose the idea.
Sorry.
No, please, because I want to talk about that. When he says it's impossible for me to not be circular, I pointed out you're including existence in your definition of existence, and so you're being circular. He said
we can show examples of being direct, right?
Right, and he's saying it's impossible for me to not be.
Right, and that's just wrong.
Yeah, if
that's how logic works, it's not circular.
Right, if you're reasoning yourself in a circle, there's a problem. If he says it's impossible, no, it just means that your model's bad.
Right. So in that case, it would be proper to give a good example of using reasoning that's not circular.
Right. And if it doesn't, you take what we know, you take those concepts like we were talking about last week, that understanding of what different fallacies are, and you apply them, and you go, okay, does this match? Am I using bad reasoning? That said, I just wanted to tie a bow on the circular piece. You were asking about something. We put a pin in it.
I was asking about the foundation of reality.
Ah, got it. Okay. So this is kind of a hallmark of the transcendental argument. So we're having to go over these other arguments, right? These last 2 episodes, we've gone over the ontological argument. The transcendental argument for the existence of God includes that foundation piece. So let's see. Oh my gosh, it's been 25 minutes again.
We're going to have to do another episode.
Okay. I do not.
I'm just taking all of your episodes.
That's okay. I want to talk about it. I want to talk about how we look at foundations and how we build things up. And we have very real problems on our side. There are very real issues that are not accounted for. And understanding those and knowing that, hey, you know what, here are problems, definitely helps us stay humble and accountable. And I think it's a good thing. I do, but it's going to take me I'm glad that we recorded this in 2 parts, because it's going to take me 2 weeks to get the next piece together, I think.
For sure.
Um,
But this is so common. These kinds of really like twisted, complicated claims are so common that I really appreciate that you're taking the time to do this rather than just take each one little claim here and there and break it down, because it's so much more complicated than I know a God exists.
yeah. And it's, I don't know, but ultimately for me, this is my jams. I love this. I live
You're so
for
in your
this.
element.
It's something that I absolutely adore. Now, I'm sure that I got a couple of things wrong. When you're dealing with this much material, please in the comments let me know what I got wrong, so that I can make sure that I cop to it and say, hey, I made a mistake in the next week. If you enjoyed this, well, actually, I'll hit the or hit the like button, because that helps. But we're going to go over that in just a minute. Before then, though, Jenna, how can people find you?
I have a YouTube channel and it's called Jenna Belk, and the show that I have going right now is called Atheistasis, where I try to relearn, because my foundationalism fell, and now I have to figure out what my foundation for reality is. So, I'm taking each new subject, like every single subject you can possibly think of, and trying to take different perspectives, whether it's somebody with a PhD or just a friend that I know that's fascinated by a subject, and I'm trying to just relearn things. And then I'm also on this show that we're breaking down, which is AXP, the Atheist Experience, and that's on Sundays at 4:30 p.m. Central.
I honestly think you're underselling yourself. Number one, Jenna asks all of the right questions. When it comes to breaking something down, I have not seen a single point that Jenna hasn't gone, wait, hold on a second, I didn't understand that. and that is rare. That is rare, and I don't see enough of that. Number two, you say, oh, well, I just meet up with my friends. You have no idea how cool Jenna's friends are, because Jenna has access to some of the most prominent atheist YouTubers and personalities out there. And so when she has a friend on, it's not like Billy down the street. No, she sat down with Anthony frickin' Magnabosco.
Right.
She sat down with, some pretty accomplished
Dave Warnock,
authors.
you.
So it's, anyway.
You're in there.
I do think that they are fantastic conversations. The openness that you have makes me want to put these out, because we did not have to rehearse any of this. And every question that you had was something that I was able to go into, because, hey, that actually turns out to be the next thing we were going to talk about. It was perfect. It was perfect.
Awesome.
Jenna, thank you so much. And I will see you on the next episode. All right, moving over to solo. All righty, everybody, that is it for the 2-part. Is it a series if it's 2 parts? Hold on, Jenna, is it a series if it's 2 parts? Sequence. Okay. That's it for the 2-part sequence on the ontological argument with myself and Jenna Belk. Hit here, press here if you want to subscribe to the channel. I put out content every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. If you want to see part 1 and you missed the card, click right here. If you like what I do and you want to get early access to videos, I do give early access to patrons. It's freaking awesome. Right up here, here's a link to my Patreon. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.